It was in May of 1996. Kristin Smart and Paul Flores were walking back to the Cal Poly San Luis Obispo campus after an off-campus party. Both were freshmen at the time. Smart was reported missing a couple of days later. Paul Flores remained a person of interest for more than 25 years.
The night was slipping quietly into morning when she disappeared. The party had ended, laughter had faded, and the campus of California Polytechnic State University lay mostly still beneath the early hours of May 25, 1996. Streetlights cast long shadows over empty walkways, and the warm California air carried the feeling of a night that should have ended like any other. Instead, it marked the beginning of a mystery that would refuse to die. A 19-year-old freshman vanished somewhere between a party and her dorm room, leaving behind nothing but questions, silence, and a family that would spend decades searching for answers. Kristin Denise Smart was in her first year at Cal Poly, far from her childhood home but excited about the future ahead of her. Friends described her as friendly, confident, and athletic, someone who easily fit into college life. She loved sports, enjoyed being around people, and had quickly made friends on campus. Like many freshmen, she spent her weekends attending parties, exploring independence, and learning how to navigate adulthood. On the evening of May 24, she headed to an off-campus gathering near Crandall Way, unaware that it would be the final night anyone would ever see her alive. As the hours passed, Kristin drank heavily. By the early morning, she was clearly intoxicated, struggling to remain upright and barely able to focus. Around 2 a.m., witnesses noticed her lying on a neighbor's lawn, disoriented and vulnerable. 2 students stopped to help, recognizing that she was in no condition to make it back alone. They lifted her to her feet and began walking her across the quiet campus toward her dorm, moving slowly as she leaned on them for support. The walk was short, but it didn't stay quiet for long. Along the way, another student joined the group. He appeared concerned, noting that Kristin lived near his dorm. He offered to take over, assuring the others that he would make sure she got home safely. Relieved that someone closer to her destination was there to help, the 2 students stopped walking with them and watched as Kristin continued on, supported by someone she seemed to trust. It was a brief moment, unremarkable at the time, yet it would later become one of the most scrutinized interactions in the case. Kristin never arrived at her dorm. She never swiped into the building. She never opened her door. When her roommate woke later that morning, Kristin's bed was untouched. Her shoes were gone, but everything else remained as it had been the night before. At first, friends assumed she had stayed elsewhere, but as hours passed with no word, worry began to set in. By the afternoon, Kristin Smart was officially reported missing. The initial search was chaotic and slow. Campus police began looking around nearby areas, but critical time had already been lost. Kristin's parents, Stan and Denise Smart, were notified and rushed to San Luis Obispo, their lives instantly divided into before and after. They walked the campus, retraced steps, and spoke to anyone who might have seen their daughter. Almost immediately, they sensed that this was no ordinary missing person case. Something had gone terribly wrong. As investigators pieced together the last known movements of Kristin's night, one detail stood out. She had not been alone when she was last seen. She had been helped. Someone had taken responsibility for her safety. And yet, she had vanished completely. Police began questioning students who attended the party and those who had crossed paths with her afterward. Stories overlapped, timelines formed, and slowly attention began to focus on one particular individual. In the days following Kristin's disappearance, unusual details surfaced. A student named Paul Flores, connected to her final walk, displayed injuries that raised questions. His explanations shifted when pressed. Cadaver dogs later alerted to the scent of human remains in his dorm room. Despite this, investigators found themselves stuck. There was no physical evidence strong enough to justify an arrest, and most critically, there was no body. Weeks turned into months. Searches expanded to surrounding hills, fields, and construction sites. Volunteers combed the land under the California sun. Kristin's face appeared on flyers and billboards, her smile becoming a symbol of hope and heartbreak. Tips flooded in, but none led to her recovery. Eventually, the searches slowed, media attention faded, and the case drifted into the category every family dreads: cold. For Kristin's parents, there was no moving on. They refused to let her name disappear. They challenged law enforcement, organized searches, and kept the case alive through interviews and public appearances. Every birthday passed without answers. Every holiday carried the weight of her absence. Years went by, yet the silence surrounding her disappearance only grew louder. Meanwhile, troubling patterns began to emerge. Women came forward with stories about a man whose behavior mirrored the circumstances of Kristin's disappearance. They described being drugged, assaulted, and left confused and terrified. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Still, without definitive proof tying him to Kristin's fate, the justice system remained frozen. In 2002, 6 years after she vanished, Kristin Smart was legally declared dead. It was a devastating milestone, one that confirmed what her family already knew but had never stopped hoping against. Even then, no charges were filed. The person long suspected remained free, living life while Kristin lay somewhere unknown. In April 2021, nearly 25 years after Kristin Smart disappeared, the case reached a moment that once seemed impossible. Arrests were finally made, ending decades of speculation, frustration, and unanswered questions. The man long suspected of being responsible for Kristin's disappearance was formally charged with her murder, bringing a wave of attention back to a case that had haunted California since the mid-1990s. In addition to that charge, a family member was accused of helping cover up the crime, suggesting that Kristin's disappearance was not only the result of violence, but also of deliberate efforts to hide the truth.
That's right, Marla. That podcaster had a lot to do with the outcome of this case. It was his continuous coverage and the pressure that led to the arrest of 2 people. One of those men was taken into custody at this house in San Pedro.
24 years without a resolution until today.
What happened to Kristin Smart after leaving a college party on May 25th, 1996, is still unknown. But investigators now say Paul Flores, who back then was considered a person of interest in Smart's disappearance, is now the prime suspect in her murder.
I'm here this afternoon to announce the arrest of Paul Flores for the murder of Kristin Smart and the arrest of his father, Ruben Flores, as an accessory to the murder.
Both were arrested at the same time Tuesday morning. 44-year-old Flores was taken into custody in San Pedro, while his 80-year-old father was arrested at his home in Arroyo Grande.
During the search warrant, detectives recovered evidence related to the murder of Kristin.
For investigators, the arrests represented a major breakthrough. For Kristin's parents, however, the moment was complicated and deeply painful. It was the result they had hoped for over decades of advocacy, yet it offered no sense of closure. Their daughter was still missing, and the knowledge that justice might finally move forward did nothing to ease the ache of not knowing where she was or what had happened to her body. The announcement of the arrest reopened old wounds for the Smart family. For years, they had lived with uncertainty, clinging to the belief that answers would one day come. That belief had sustained them through countless disappointments, false leads, and periods when the case seemed forgotten. When the charges were filed, they were forced to relive the trauma of Kristin's disappearance once again, this time under the glare of national attention. While many viewed the arrests as long overdue justice, Kristin's parents understood that the legal process could not replace the loss of their daughter, nor could it erase the years stolen from their family by unanswered questions and grief.
Search warrants that San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office served on Paul Flores led to the seizure of his computer. And on that computer apparently was very substantial evidence that establishes that Paul Flores is a serial rapist. My job is to try to help in my own small way at generating interest in the disappearance. We have received, just at my office, 30 tips.
And Jim had some powerful final words for Ruben as their lawsuit against him moves forward.
I'm not talking to Ruben other than to tell Ruben what I said 24 years and 11 months ago in my first interview. We're never going to stop until we get you.
Smart.
I know they took soil samples from his dad's house, about 400 or 500 miles away from here.
Karen Kinsley is Paul's aunt. She refuses to believe her nephew could have hurt his college classmate.
He said he liked her, and he doesn't know what happened to her. So that's all I know.
Detectives and people who knew both Smart and Flores. The podcast also revealed evidence considered crucial in the disappearance of Smart, and he highlighted behavior like this from Paul's father during a deposition.
What other times have you talked to your son about anything to do with the Kristin Smart case?
The trial that followed was unlike most murder cases, challenging traditional expectations of what justice looks like in the courtroom. There was no body to present as evidence, no murder weapon recovered, no direct confession tying the defendant to the act. Instead, prosecutors were tasked with proving guilt through circumstantial evidence, witness testimony, and a long pattern of disturbing behavior that stretched back to the night Kristin vanished. They argued that the lack of physical remains did not mean that a crime had not occurred, nor did it excuse the actions of the men charged. Their case focused on the last known movements of Kristin Smart, the behavior of the defendant before and after her disappearance, and evidence suggesting that her body had been hidden and later moved. As the trial unfolded, the jury was asked to consider not only the evidence presented, but also the broader implications of their decision. They were tasked with determining whether a murder conviction could stand in the absence of physical remains, and whether a pattern of behavior and circumstantial evidence could meet the high burden required by law. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, with every testimony scrutinized and every argument carefully weighed. Kristin's family listened as intimate details of her disappearance were revisited, knowing that this trial represented their best chance for accountability after decades of waiting. Paul Flores, who had been the last person seen with Kristin Smart, was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict marked a historic moment in a case that had remained unresolved for more than 25 years, although one defendant was acquitted.
The man convicted of murdering 19-year-old Kristin Smart back in 1996 will face a judge for sentencing. Smart was a freshman at Cal Poly when she disappeared all those years ago after attending a party off campus. Her body was never found, and authorities finally declared her dead in 2002. Paul Flores was found guilty of first-degree murder in October of last year in Smart's death. Several witnesses testified that he was the last person seen walking with Smart back to the dorms that night, the last one with her. Prosecutors argued that he raped or attempted to rape her and then killed her in his dorm room. He now faces 25 years to life in prison after the jury found him guilty. That will be up to the judge to decide later this.
The conviction sent a clear message that time does not erase responsibility, and that the absence of a body does not prevent justice from being served. For the first time since Kristin disappeared, the legal system formally acknowledged what her family had believed for decades.
Obispo County Sheriff Ian Parkinson said her body had not yet been found.
I'm here this afternoon to announce the arrest of Paul Flores for the murder of Kristin Smart and the arrest of his father, Ruben Flores, as an accessory to the murder. We have not recovered Kristin. We will continue to focus on finding her remains regardless of any court action. I'll say some of that information came to light through the podcast that many of you are familiar with.
Paul Flores' first court appearance is scheduled for later this week.
Today, Kristin Smart's remains have still not been found. Decades after her disappearance, her parents continue to search, holding on to the hope that one day they will be able to bring their daughter home and lay her to rest. Their determination has never faded, even after years of uncertainty and heartbreak. Kristin's case reshaped campus safety laws across California, leading to reforms designed to protect students and prevent similar tragedies. She trusted someone to walk her home, believing she was safe. Though justice came many years later and remains incomplete, her story endured. Her name was spoken, remembered, and carried forward by those who refused to let her disappear twice, once in the night and again in memory